All right, guys, welcome back to group two of my Dynasty 2023 quarterbacks for your rookie drafts. In tier one, we talked about C.J. Stroud and Anthony Richardson, and leading off tier two here for me. And again, I'm not trying to be hot takey or anything like that, but I actually have Hendon Hooker over Bryce Young. I have both of these guys as my tier two quarterbacks, but I have Hendon Hooker above Bryce Young. And again, people are going to probably not like that very much, but here's the thing. Hendon Hooker, he's older. I understand that completely. 6'4", 218-ish pounds, and he's a super senior. He's got 5 years of experience. Didn't play as a freshman, but he's played multiple games every other year since then. Played first 3 years, including 3 games as a freshman. Again, didn't have any attempts whatsoever. So I don't know how you have 3 games. Maybe did a couple of rushing attempts or something like that. I don't look. Yeah, a couple of rushes. That's all he did as a rookie. So first 3 years in college at Virginia Tech. Not a great school, let's be honest there. Didn't really do much through the air. Only less than 100 completions in both of those seasons. But then he goes to Tennessee in 2021. Massive shoot up spike, if you will, as a senior with Tennessee. He had 13 games, 303 attempts, 206 completion, so a 68% completion rate, which is pretty good for 3,000 yards at Tennessee. He had 31 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions. But here's the best part about Hendon Hooker, in my opinion. On the ground, he is pretty mobile. He's a good threat on the ground. He had 166 rushing attempts in 2021 for 616 yards, 5 touchdowns, and then this year he built off that 2021 season. And Tennessee was pretty good this year. And I don't know college as well. I watched a couple college games this year, but Tennessee played tight in a lot of tough games, right? This year he played 11 games total, 329 passing attempts, actually improved his completion percentage, 70% completion percentage, 3,100 yards, 27 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions. So he's very, very smart with the football in his hands. He doesn't make a lot of turnovers, but then again on the ground, 104 rushing attempts for 430 yards, 5 touchdowns yet again. So he's kind of a all-around type of player for me. I really liked Hendon Hooker. I watched him in a couple games, and Tennessee, they're starting to turn around. I think Tennessee is going to be one of the powerhouse schools here in the next couple of years. I don't really know college that well. The coaching changes way too frequently in college for me to to really understand schools that much. Recruiting, scouting, all that stuff is so much more important. So, and I just don't really care that much. So, I think Tennessee is going to be taking a step up, and I think Hendon Hooker has looked very good since coming to Tennessee, much better than he did with Virginia Tech. If you just take those off and he only had 2 years as a starter at Tennessee, this guy would easily be a first-round quarterback option, in my opinion. What do you think on Hendon Hooker here?
I like Hendon Hooker. I feel he was a product of a good offense and having better athletes. So, I don't think he necessarily. I think with the Tennessee offense, they're a very quick offense, and it's almost like the Chip Kelly offense where it's a hurry up style. Like they try to have as many plays as they can to score. So the product of a lot of that and making quick throws. And then he had Hyatt as his wide receiver one. So I think that helped him a lot. So I like him, but him going down with his ACL injury around things. So that I wouldn't say that hurt, but I think that hurts his development 23 because he's still in that camp time. It's to be even ready for around when the season.
Yeah, and I will say with Hendon Hooker, I don't think it's a big detriment. I think teams are going to look at him if if he ends up being a first round quarterback prospect, which I think he's the last one. I think Will Levis, I think who we talked about, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, and Anthony Richardson. I think those 4 are probably going to be first round actual NFL first round picks. But I think Hendon Hooker has the potential to sneak in as the 5th guy. I don't think anybody else is going to jump up here. I think Hendon Hooker is either going to be a 2nd or a 1st. If he can get first round draft capital in the actual NFL, let's say he goes somewhere like, let's say he goes from Tennessee to Tennessee. Let's say he gets drafted by the Titans in either the 2nd round or, late first or whatever, gets to sit behind Ryan Tannehill for 1 year, recover his ACL. I like him quite a bit. And okay, he's older. Who cares? He's going to be 24 at a position where they play until they're 45 nowadays. So it really doesn't matter that much at quarterback if he's a little bit older. Joe Burrow was older. Who cares? You know what I mean? Like, these guys come out and they can if they're good, they're good. And that's basically all it is for the quarterback position. You don't really have to worry about them aging out like you do some of the other skilled players. So I will say the best thing, and I know you think that Tennessee does a lot more dink and dunk stuff, but his actual air yards, like attempts and everything, are higher than CJ Stroud's. They're higher than Bryce Young's, like his yards per attempt, his yards, adjusted yards per attempt. So he throws it quite a bit further down the field than a lot of these other guys that are up here. So the fact that he does it well, 70% completion percentage, 68% completion percentage, 27 touchdowns with only 5 interceptions in both years, split over 2 years. That's pretty good. He does not make mistakes. And I like that quite a bit. He averaged 9.6 yards per attempt, 58 touchdowns, and 5 picks with Tennessee. Those are good numbers. That is just great football by this guy. So I think, again,
I do agree with that, but also with their offense, they're playing very up tempo and they're allowing the defense to sub a lot.
Sure.
So I feel they were playing fast enough. They were able to confuse a college defense, honestly.
Fair.
It really is, and he's playing in the SEC where there are good athletes, also some trash.
Yeah, that is true.
So and he's playing in the SEC. A lot of teams aren't as good. So I feel he was taking advantage of a lot of his. So I'm not saying I don't like Hooker. I just don't like him as much.
Sure.
Because of those reasons.
I get it.
It's because of those reasons.
I get it, and like I said, these are raw, but I've actually watched Hendon Hooker a couple times this year, and I've liked what I saw. Like, I think I've seen 3 games of his this year, and I liked what I saw from him. I just got a good feeling by watching him. You know what I mean? Like that good gut feeling. So we'll see what he can do in the NFL. Draft capital again will be kind of important for him, but the best thing for fantasy drafts is, even if this guy is a first round pick, I think that a lot of people are going to be in your camp, right? And they're going to be skeptical. And the best part about that is, this guy, I don't see him ever moving his way up into the first round of rookie drafts. So I think that's pretty good. If you can get this guy in the early 2nd round in your rookie drafts, I think it's going to be a steal personally, but that's going to be, this is why we're doing these podcasts now. So you can kind of hear these thoughts, and we're going to evaluate this. This is not going to be the last time we talk about these quarterbacks, right? But I wanted to do an early rankings just to see how things change over the offseason, because so many times we have these guys ranked, probably correctly, like AJ Brown at the end of his college career, right? AJ Brown was most people's wide receiver 1. Then the combine, then all the stuff happened that offseason, all the workouts and interviews, and people changed the rankings, rewatch all the tape and everything. I think AJ Brown went from being the wide receiver number 1 in that draft class to like wide receiver 3, 4, 5. And this is for fantasy football, not for real football. And the funny thing about that is, you look at it now, he's wide receiver 1 out of that draft class by far. He's in all dynasty rankings, he's a top 4 dynasty wide receiver, and it shows, right? So the fact that these guys can move so much in the offseason is something that we got to be very careful about. And that's why we're trying to get this out there early, so that we can, get a definitive rating on these guys and watch their progress as the offseason commences, right? So Hendon Hooker, I think, again, I don't think he's going to be a first-round rookie pick. Maybe maybe that surprises me, but I just don't see it coming. I think he has a potential to be a first-round NFL pick, and if that's the case, watch out, man. I'm going to be drafting this guy everywhere. Any thoughts?
I think he's definitely going to be. Yeah, well, he's definitely going to be one to watch. I don't see him sneaking into the first round. In the real draft, I can see I see him being like a mid day two. It's it's second round.
Maybe. Here's
And
the thing with
now
these.
I mean I can see him upper mid second. I really don't think he's
The only
first.
thing with these quarterbacks nowadays is people are just kind of valuing that fifth-year option on them so much more. So, even if he's probably not, I could see someone trading, 31, 32 for him. If he's going to make it in, like, that's what I'm kind of projecting. I think that he's going to, probably come out. He's probably not going to be valued as a first-round pick by most teams, but somebody might trade him. Maybe they get him in the second round. Maybe they can sit tight. But the ACL injury does definitely kind of hurt his draft stock a little bit more.
It does.
But we'll see where it goes. So Hendon Hooker, the biggest watch for me in this offseason, because like I said, he's my number 3 quarterback right now. Early rankings, I like him enough to put him as my number 3 guy for fantasy football and going forward, but we'll see how that kind of shifts. So any final thoughts on Hooker before we move on?
Nope.
All right, so that leaves us with my number 4 guy, the last guy in my tier 2 here, the Alabama superstar Bryce Young, who is going to be probably the number 1 overall pick. And people are going to say, "Oh, you're devaluing the number 1 overall pick that highly, huh?" Yes, I am. Because here's the thing with Bryce Young. I just talked about it that I'm done betting against these physical outliers, right? We talked about it with Anthony Richardson. He's a positive outlier, right? Bryce Young is a negative outlier. Bryce Young is listed at 6 foot 194. Everyone said he's probably more realistically 5'10" and 3/4 and like 190. So he's a small quarterback. Very good, plays for Alabama. You expect him to be pretty dang good, right? But you look at his stats and it is Alabama, but they just have not blown me away, to be honest with you. He was really good in 2021, very good in 2021, don't get me wrong. But, 67% completion percentage in 2021 on 547 passing attempts, almost 5,000 yards last year, 47 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, good rate there. But CJ Stroud has been better through both of these seasons, in my opinion, stats-wise, completion-wise, touchdown-wise. And, on the ground, there's really not much looking forward to for Bryce Young. He's not the most mobile guy. He does seem to scramble a little bit more than someone like CJ Stroud does, but it's just not really there. And then when you throw in the size concerns, at least for me, I don't like him that much for fantasy football. Now, he's going to be the number 1 overall pick. So he's going to have the longest leash out of all of these guys probably that are going to be drafted in this upcoming draft. But that doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to be the best or safest for fantasy football. And go back to what I said about CJ Stroud. In my opinion, he's going to be a probably top 10, top 15 pick in the NFL draft. He's going to be probably the safest because I think that he's better through the air than someone like Bryce Young. I think that he's got more potential on the ground, and he's going to go to a better team because he's going later in the draft. So what are your thoughts on Bryce Young, and tell me why I'm crazy here to have him as my number 4 quarterback for fantasy football?
I hear all your thoughts, and I feel all of them are valid. But I feel I feel last year he played out of his mind. Also with that, like he had a lot of superstars.
Mm-hmm.
He was throwing to, and Alabama as a whole was a better team.
Yep.
So I think I feel that has a lot to go into how he played this year, not having as good of a team. You know, he was more of the focal point compared to having Jameson Williams,
To me,
and all
though,
those other players. Yeah, yeah,
real quick too, for me, that is a bigger concern. Like that's a massive red flag for me. Like if you take away a guy's talent, Like one of the things a couple years ago, one of the reasons why I love Justin Herbert, he put up all the numbers with no first round, second round, third round wide receivers. None of his skill players went in the top 3 rounds of that draft class. I love Justin Herbert because he was able to produce with nobody, right? These guys that can produce with guys, and CJ Stroud is the perfect counter example to this, right? Because he has amazing guys, but he was able. We already talked about it with CJ Stroud. He took a massive hit in terms of skill players, right? He lost his top 3 wide receivers this year and still put up pretty comparable numbers. It was a little bit of a dip. We talked about it with him. Go back and listen, but you know, he still was able to perform and produce pretty similarly. The big drop off from Bryce Young, when you lose a lot of guys, he lost John Mechie, Jameson Williams, Brian Robinson, and that's pretty much it. He only lost those 3 guys. There wasn't that big of a changeover from year to year. And it's Alabama. You can get any 5-star wide receiver you want. That to me is a massive red flag.
I don't disagree with that. I still think he's going to be up there in rookie drafts.
Oh,
And
for
and and
sure.
and just like what you were saying, he's probably gonna get picked by the Texans, unfortunately. And I don't really see a lot of success out of quarterbacks that are, which that's been the big stick
Right. That's
for
the biggest
a
problem,
lot of them.
right?
It is, and I completely agree with.
So to me, and the reason why I'm knocking him so much, and because like you just said, he's going to be up there in your rookie draft. He's probably going to be the first quarterback taken. He's probably going to be, Bijan Robinson's probably the number 1 overall pick in almost every single draft, unless you're absolutely stacked a running back. You're going to be taking Bryce Young over him. But to me, that just creates a massive opportunity at, the 3 pick or the 4 pick. It's just going to push some of these guys down because if everyone's taking Bryce Young 102, 101 or 102, and he doesn't deserve it, that just creates a massive opening window for me personally.
No, I agree. So, I mean, I do like Bryce Young, but I think him playing this year really deflated a lot of what the 2021 year he had.
Mm-hmm.
So, I feel that's how all these quarterbacks, they're kind of just right now. Like they're, they're really solid quarterbacks. I don't think Bryce Young is that like game changer. I feel he's pretty solid. I feel he's confident in himself, able to make plays. I'm watching him a second ago. Like I like the defense. I feel he can do those things, but I feel his height.
He's
Uh,
definitely got talent,
yeah,
and with all the negatives,
yeah,
like
he definitely has.
I don't want to get it lost. I'm not just knocking the talent of the guy. He is very good, but he's just such an
Very, very
outlier.
talented.
He's going to go to Houston, who everyone has wanted to rag on for a couple years now, and like I just don't think the situation's going to be good for him. I don't think the talent's very good. Like the talent of the team, right? Of the Houston Texans. They're going to have to,
At
they still need probably 2 more wide receivers in that team. And, if you're
least, yeah.
using the 101 on this guy, it's not going to leave you a ton of the defense is still terrible. So I don't know. To me, there's just too many red flags. And he doesn't provide enough upside for fantasy football for the investment that you're making in him, right? If you're investing the 101,
Yes.
let's just say he's the 101, right? Let's say quarterback super flex league, you're taking a quarterback first. At least with Anthony Richardson or Hendon Hooker, when they're healthy, they provide a very healthy ground game, right? That's where you're going to get those outliers. And then if either one of those guys can produce through the air, similar, like 4,000 passing yards or whatever, that's where you get those elite fantasy options, right? That's where those guys come in, and that's why they're above Bryce Young. The reason why I have CJ Stroud above Bryce Young is he's better through the air, right? Neither one of these guys are that
Yeah.
mobile, but Bryce Young is worse than someone like CJ Stroud, in my opinion, through the air. So it's just he does nothing better than any of those other guys. But again, he will be the number 1 overall pick, more than likely. Like the betting favorite right now to be the number 1 overall pick. So it's just one of those things where you
Yeah.
kind of have to
I,
over
I, I,
explain it.
right. I agree with what, and I find it interesting how the media portrays Bryce Young compared to Stroud.
Mhm.
It's I mean, I'm biased as Ohio State. I know I know I see it a lot different. I a lot more because because I watch stuff on I don't like watching, and for several reasons, and a lot of it is because they're more geared towards the SEC players
Yeah.
because they have the SEC
SEC
network,
bias. Yeah.
and yeah, it's the SEC bias, and they also have like it's the ACC bias as well with 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 being under that the ESPN umbrella,
Mhm.
so like for those players are hyped up a lot more compared to or shown on like Fox or Big Ten Network or
Yeah.
whatever other network. So I I feel some of these players don't get hyped up because of the platforms that they're shown on.
Yeah, and that's fair. And I will say, you're biased towards Ohio State. And for me to have CJ Stroud as my number one guy, being an Ohio State quarterback, I am biased against Ohio State. I like to root against Ohio State as much as I can because I generally, you're not so bad, but generally the Ohio State fans are some of the worst ever for college. Like
Or
they
no,
just,
I
oh my
agree. I
gosh.
agree. I agree with
They're like Raiders fans for the NFL. They're just so obnoxious. It's like, oh my gosh, please stop. But anyway, so I'm biased against Ohio State generally. So for me to have CJ Stroud means that I must really, I am overlooking my personal bias there. So no, I think that Bryce Young has a lot of tools, and it doesn't mean that he's going to be bad. And that's what like I said earlier when I was talking about the measurables, the outliers, um, I'm done betting against these guys. They can go and produce for someone else. That is totally fine. But I just don't want to take the risk that they're not going to because, it's worked out the last couple years, but generally through the course of the NFL, betting against the known, right, does not pay off very well. And when you got these size outliers, these short guys like Drew Brees, he worked out pretty well. Baker Mayfield, not so well. And Baker is more common than Drew Brees is, right? So I'm just done betting on him personally. Doesn't mean he's going to be bad, but again, I just think that it creates such a great buying window in your dynasty leagues for these rookie picks because again, number one overall is probably going to be Bijan. Number two overall, almost universally in a superflex, is going to be Bryce Young. So, stop shooting for those picks. Go for the 103 if you really want one of these other guys and you want another position. So we'll talk on some of the other positions here soon. But that's all I have for my top two tiers. Tier two, Hendon Hooker and Bryce Young. Again, we'll reevaluate these guys as time goes on. But is there anything else you wanted to talk on for tier two here before we moved on to number three?
tier two. I am really excited to hear your tier three quarter.
Yeah, and this is where we start to get a little bit more into the the potential upside. That's like we talked about. I think there's only potential for 4, maybe 5 first round quarterbacks in the actual NFL draft, and we're now through 4 of these guys. So there's only one left, and we're getting into basically upside and measurables and things like that at this point, where you're going to take a stab at some of these guys, but more than likely there might be one other guy that has real fantasy value going forward. And then at that point, you just need someone like a Dak Prescott to come out of nowhere or, Jalen Hurts or someone like that to outproduce the starter. And that's going to be risky. So we're going to take a quick break and we'll be back sometime here shortly with tier number 3.